Previous week, we had gone over فصل في التحري في الأواني والثياب. So, investigating utensils, investigating clothing, if they have any najasa on them. So, what are the rulings pertaining to that? So today, inshallah, we will be covering أحكام الآبار وتطهيرها. That, so this chapter is related to, wells and purification, if najasa happens to fall into them. So it says, Imam Shurun Bulari, the author, he says, تنزل البئر الصغيرة بوقوع نجاسة وإن قلت من غير الأرواح كقطرة دم أو خمر. Okay. So he's saying that if the well is small and najasa, impurity, happens to fall in, okay, so if the impurity is a drop of blood, alcohol, then min ghayr al-arwah wa in qallat, even if it is a small amount, because if it's a small amount, a small impurity, it's going to make impure a small quantity of water. A small amount of impurity will make impure a small quantity of water. We have already defined what constitutes a huge quantity, a large quantity of water, that it's 10 by 10. Right? This is what we have defined. But if a small quantity of najasa falls into a small quantity of water, then that water is impure, meaning that one cannot attain purity from the usage of that water, even if you can't see the najasa. So if, for example, a drop of alcohol falls into, let's say, a water bottle, can you see the drop of alcohol? No. You can't see the drop of alcohol in that water bottle, right? So can we do wudu from such water? Can we drink from that water? Can we purify our clothing from that water? No. Even though you can't see it, even though it is not visible, it's mixed in with the water, that water, because it is a small amount, will be considered as najis. I mean, again, you and I, we might look at these juristic issues as possibly archaic. That when we read about, issues such as these, about wells, we might think, you know what, this is archaic. It doesn't really apply to modern day context. Right? This is something that may arise in our minds, but actually they do. Let's say you're in a factory. Now, in factories, there are many types of liquids. Right? You have vinegar that is produced in factories. You have, before ketchup becomes that thick, viscous, that we find in packages, it's a liquid. So what if in those situations a small amount of najasa falls into a vat? Because it's a massive vat. There's a vat, right? In these industrialized factories, there are actually massive, humongous vats. So then these rules will be applicable in those types of situations, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, all the way to possibly colonial times, the world was fairly agrarian. So when questions arose, they were related to the agricultural world, because it was an agrarian world. Right? People, they lived off of the lands. So when questions were presented to their local jurists, the jurists, they would exercise their reasoning based on the Quran, based on the Sunnah, based on analogy, based on consensus of the scholars, and then they would issue a ruling. But Then something happened. Now this trend continued until the days of colonialism. Because when colonialism occurred, what happened? Now we have banks. In our rural areas, we have banks. We have massive factories, right? So now when questions are arising, and fuqaha, they are unable to answer because they're playing catch up. So then what people do is that, you know what, this doesn't make sense. The Western world, they've gone leagues ahead of us. And then what happens is that an inferiority complex is created within a person. That, you know what, these fuqaha, these people from the past, they don't really know anything. They don't know what they're talking about. So they are to blame. So you know what, let's go back to the sources. Let's go back to the Quran and Sunnah. It's laudable. It's amazing going back to the Quran and Sunnah. But we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is there. The wheel is there. The usul are there. The fundamentals are there. Everything is there for us. It's just that we don't know how to apply the rules. For example, modern day interaction, modern day transactions, right? Modern day transactions. Modern day transactions, it's not really between human and human, unless you go to the store. What if you're transacting with a vending machine? All of the questions, all of the issues, they were related to human transactions. But nowadays, let's say you're transacting with a vending machine. Is such a transaction valid? Is that a valid transaction? You're buying something, you're inserting some quarters, and the vending machine, it gives you a bag of chips, it gives you a candy bar, it gives you a drink. Is that a valid transaction? When you're buying something from Amazon, you're just clicking. You have Prime, you have Amazon Prime, you click, 2-day shipping, it's in your home. Is that a valid transaction? Right? So we might look at the fiqh books, we might look at the books of jurisprudence and say, you know what, there's really no answer over here. But those scholars, we fail to see that those scholars, they have laid the groundwork. They have laid the groundwork to identify what kind of transaction is taking place when you're transacting with a vending machine or you're transacting on Amazon. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel and go back to Quran and Sunnah. Everything is already there. So this is the reason why we have to study from the ground up. Once we study these juristic books, these Islamic law books from the ground up, then when we have our fundamentals in order, then we can build on that. We can build on that. But it is imperative that we understand the fiqh and the ruling behind why this was mentioned, why this was said. So the fuqaha, as I said, they had usul, they had fundamentals, and using those fundamentals, using the usul, they extracted laws from the Quran and Sunnah. They extracted laws from the Quran and Sunnah. And this extracting of laws from the Quran and Sunnah, it was based off of, at times, it was based off of the Imam's own understanding. Right? Because you have these schools of thought. You have these schools of thought. They were regional. You had the school of Medina, you had the school of Iraq. These were the two primary schools. Right? The school of Medina, the helm of the school of Medina was none other than Imam Malik, the star. And the school of Iraq, it was Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam A'lam. Right? And it was later on that Imam Shafi, rahmatullah alayhi, he studied under both schools. He studied under Imam Malik. Right? He was a student of Imam Malik. And then after that, he departed from Medina, came to Imam Muhammad bin Hassan Shaybani, one of the students of Abu Hanifa. He came as a mujtahid. He came as a mujtahid with his own independent thoughts. And he came as a defender, a barrister for the Maliki madhab. He came as a barrister, as an advocate for the Maliki school. So Imam Muhammad, anyway, moving on. So what I was trying to say, if I continue on this, then I'm going to keep on going. Let's just go back to the book. Okay. So these masail, these juristic issues, these are fundamental issues that we have to understand them, and then we can build on them. So moving on. So Imam Shurum Bulali, rahmatullah alayhi, he says that all of the water will be taken out of a small well if any kind of najasa, any kind of impurity falls in. Right? Even if that impurity is small, if it's a minute amount, if it's a drop of blood, alcohol, because a small amount is going to make a small amount of water impure, even if it is not visible. The eye, it's not discerning to the eye. Okay, this includes min ghayr al-arwath. It includes dung. It includes dung, and that's going to come ahead. قطرة دم أو خمر, then he mentioned so من غير الأرواث قطرة دم أو خمر. So he made a jumla mu'tarada over here by mentioning, though this rule it is not inclusive of a small amount of dung. And the reason behind this is because it's unavoidable. Right? In rural areas where animals frequent, right? You have cows, right? You have sheep, you have goats. Sometimes what happens is that they are defecating, and because of the winds or something, it happens to find its way into the well. So just because you see one or two doesn't necessarily mean that the water is najas. So this is a rule. This rule is taken from the rules of juristic preference. Right? Istihsan. Right? Yes.
Question is,
Yeah.
if you see that just like piece of drum in the water and you take it out
Yes.
from the water,
Yes.
and the rest of the water is still najas or not?
It is not najas. It is not najas. Unless, and it's going to come ahead, unless you find in every single drawn bucket, you find a few pieces of dung, then that water would be najas because it's excessive. It is excessive. If it's one, जिस तरह पाकिस्तान में होता है ना वो बकरियां जो होती है, तो इसका गोबर जो है, तो वो एक दो होती है, तो ये तो कोई मसला नहीं है.
And it is taken out.
It's taken out, so it's not an issue.
Okay.
Because a small amount, this is going to be overlooked. A small amount is going to be overlooked because wells, they're not generally, in those days, it wasn't as if they were really covering wells. And who's going to pollute a well? This is a source of water. Right? No one is going to come and intentionally, throw najasa in. So they would make a makeshift cover and they would just cover it up. Yeah, but sometimes what would happen is najasa would find its way because of winds or whatever, people, riding in that area, things of that nature. Okay. Now, وبوقوع خنزير ولو خرج حيا ولم يصب فمه الماء وبموت كلب أو شاة أو آدم فيها. So all of the water is going to be taken out if a pig falls into the well, even if it comes out alive. Why? A pig is najasul ayn. It's intrinsically impure.
Right.
It is intrinsically impure. And even if the tongue of the pig doesn't touch the water, even then, all of the water is going to be withdrawn. And again, the condition is it has to be mild. It has to be ma'un qaleel, small amount of water. It has to be small amount of water. If it's an excessive part, if it is an excessive amount of water, then it's going to be overlooked. It is going to be overlooked, and we have defined an excessive amount of water, 10 by 10. Okay, so if a pig happens to fall into the well, it touches the water becomes najas. Also, if a dog, if a sheep, right? Dog, sheep, even a human, if they fall into the well and they die, all of the water is going to be withdrawn. And this happened. This actually occurred in the time of Ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Zubayr. What had happened was that a man had died in Zamzam. Once upon a time, Zamzam well, it was uncovered. So a man, fell in and died as a result. So Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Zubayr, what had happened was there were many companions, there were many Sahaba, they were present there. Right? So when you have so many Sahaba present there and a command is given to take out all of the well, then this is a tacit agreement amongst the Sahaba. Similar to Tarawih being 20 rakats,
Right.
right? That you had Umar radiallahu anh institute Tarawih being 20 rakats. Did any of the Sahaba object? No, no one objected. This is tacit agreement. This is tacit agreement. In Arabic, it's called ijma' sukuti. Ijma' sukuti. Okay. Also, if these animals, they come out of the water, if the dog, for example, or the sheep, if they come out of the water and they're alive, then what is the ruling? What is the ruling in that instance? The ruling in that instance is that as long as the saliva of the dog, you feel that it didn't go into the water is still pure. It is still considered as pure. The water remains pure. Okay. وبانتفاخ حيوان ولو صغير ومئة لو لم يمكن نزعها. Now, all of the water is going to be taken out if an inflated animal, if the animal falls in, you take it out, it dies, you take it out, and it's inflated. Because what does that mean? Even if it's a small amount, even if it is a small amount. Why? Because all of the najasa of that animal, this has now spread and penetrated into the water. Because when an animal is inflated, that's an indication that it's been there for quite some time. Right. It's been there for quite some time. And if it's not possible, because let's say there's an underground spring, right, going through that well, right? So what happens is that because there's an underground spring, you can't really take out all the water. So what you do in that scenario, you take out 200 buckets of water. You take out 200 buckets of water. And the buckets, they are going to be the buckets that are used for that well. Right? Because all wells, they have a size, and all buckets, they are of a standard size based on region. Okay. وإن ماتت فيها دجاجة أو هرة أو نحوها لزم نزه 40 دلوا وإن ماتت فيها فأرة أو نحوها لزم نزه 20 دلوا وكان ذلك طهارة للبئر والدلو والرشاء ويد المستسقي. Okay, so if, for example, a chicken falls in, or a cat, or something along these lines, this type, like a possum or a raccoon, falls into the well, dies, then 40 buckets are going to be taken out. If a rat dies, or something that is of similar size, then 20 buckets are going to be taken out. And this action, right, this amal, this action of removing the water, it will purify the well, it will purify the bucket, it will purify the rope, as well as the hand of the person who is cleaning the well, because you're taking out a whole bunch of water. That's a lot. So, and this is the opinion of the companion of Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah, Imam Abu Yusuf, rahmatullah, who studied with Abu Hanifa for approximately 20 years. He was with Abu Hanifa the entire time. So he's one of the major companions of Imam Abu Hanifa. And he was one of those companions who also met with Imam Malik. He met with Imam Malik. And he was Qadi al-Qudat. One of the reasons why the Hanafi school spread was because a lot of their scholars, they were Qudat. They were judges. So obviously when you're a judge, how are you going to issue rulings? You're going to issue rulings based on your school of thought. Right? This is one of the reasons why the Hanafi mazhab spread. One of the reasons the Maliki mazhab spread was because their scholars, they were judges. Right? Their scholars, they were judges in Andalus, in Spain, and Portugal. They were all judges. So you're going to issue verdicts, right, religious edicts based on the Maliki school. Same thing with the Shafi school. Same thing with the Shafi school. You had a whole, you have a whole plethora of Qadi al-Qudat. Right? Subki was a Qadi al-Qudat, Zakaria Ansari was Qadi al-Qudat. All of them, they were big time Qudat, and that was the madhab for the Mamluk dynasty. Right? For the Mamluk dynasty, the madhab was the Shafi madhab. Right? Okay, moving on. All right. We'll just do one more. ولا تنجز البئر بالبعر والروث والخثي إلا أن يستكثره الناظر أو أن لا يخلو دلو عن بعرة. Okay. So the water that is in the well, it is not considered as najas impure if, for example, the feces, like the dung of the camel, sheep, horses, mules, donkeys, cows, falls in, because it's like kind of a solid, right? So you can easily take it out, unless a large amount is visible, or unless there's a situation that in every bucket there's some feces present, there's dung present, because in which case all of it is going to be withdrawn. All of the water is going to be removed. Okay. Inshallah, we'll stop over here. Open the floor for questions. Jazakumullah khairan. Yes.
Sheikh, you mentioned about the incident that happened at the time of Abdullah bin Zubayr, that a man died in the
Zamzam. Yeah.
yes. So what was done at that time?
So the water was all removed.
Okay.
All of the water was removed. Yeah. So the Zamzam, there's a specific amount of water, and then you have a specific amount of time before that water reaches to that level. So they removed all of that water. They estimated that, okay, this is the amount of bucket, this is the volume, this is the well size, this is the volume of water that's there right now. This is how much we have to remove. Yes.
Or all the alcohols are the same, like drinking alcohol, like rubbing alcohol, and
All of the alcohols are not the same. That's a good question. So all of the alcohols are not the same. So alcohol that is synthetic alcohol, such as rubbing alcohol. This is synthetic alcohol. Right? This is synthetic alcohol. This is not najas, according to the Hanafi school. I'm not certain about the other schools, but according to the Hanafi school, this is not considered as najas because it's synthetic. I'm sorry?
What is drinking alcohol?
So alcohol made from grapes, dates, raisins. Dates, grapes, raisins, or anything from these three fruits. This alcohol would be considered as najas. And it has the ruling of haram. There are other, it might not be an issue for this class. I can speak about it at another time.
But rubbing alcohol is fine because
Rubbing alcohol is okay. Yeah, rubbing alcohol is okay.
So is the dog here, for example, says that the khinzir, if it's alive, the
Yeah.
dog only if it's dead. So
Yeah.
for you guys, is the dog is najis or not najis?
Yeah, it's najas.
Alive or dead?
Dog alive or dead is going to be najas. Yes. Like the fur of the dog,
Yeah.
the fur is not najas. The fur, according to us, is not najas, meaning that you can pet a dog without washing the
As
hand.
long as your hand is not wet.
Yes, as long as the hand is not wet. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Sheikh, what is the ruling of a dog touches your feet sometime when you're walking, right? So
Again, as long as it's not wet.
just clean it.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything. The wudu does not break, or you don't have to wash your clothing or anything along those lines. Yeah.
Not even cleaning.
Unless it licks you.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, if it licks you, then you have to wash.
Okay.
Yeah, then you have to
The
wash
particular
3
part,
times. Yeah. You have to wash 3 times.
Inshallah.
So why then is the qaid of the dead dog? Why do we say?
The dead dog,
No, it say like for example, if the pig walks in the water,
Yeah.
a lot and comes back alive,
Yeah.
you have to remove the water. from
Yes.
water.
Yes.
It says only if the dog is dead.
if the dog is dead, that might be qayd ittifaqi. I'm not sure. I would have to look at the ibara.
Still, you have to remove the water.
I would have to
That's
look at the
what-
ibara and see if there is some specific issue there.
The small,
If a dog falls in a well,
the small
even if it comes out live, you have to remove the water. That's I have experienced this thing.
Okay.
Yes. I have seen this thing.
Go ahead, brother.
So the small amount of the dog, the dog gets from the camel by waist is about 25 cents, or
Can you repeat the question,
when
please?
it's small, it's the size of 25 cents, 50 cents.
The-
Distribution.
The feces.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, done.
Yeah, and what's the size?
It's whatever. It's pretty standard. for animals that, their feces and their dung, yeah, it's whatever is normal.
It's not 35 cents that you mentioned last.
Yeah, that's based on najasa on our clothing.
That's different.
So if, for example, it's, the diameter of it is the 50 cents coin,
Yeah, it's
and that much najasa comes onto our clothing or our body, then if it's less than that, we can offer salat. If it's more, then we would have to wash it. We have to remove it.
So you did the size of we mentioned small amounts, so depend on the water whether change.
Yes. So small amounts, yes, it would depend. If it's like you take out a bucket and you find it, okay, let's take out another bucket. Okay, there's another, it might be there, it might not be there.
Yes.
So it might be just like a one-off thing. If it's like a one-off thing, okay, no problem. Because this is umum balwa. This is umum balwa. This is something that, that's going to happen. And if you give the ruling of najasa, you can never use water. If you're too strict with it, you can't use the water. So that's why that sometimes the jurists, they were a little bit lenient in their rulings. Because water is something that everyone needs. If you're saying that, one piece of dung, right, it has fallen in and you happen to find it, okay, the whole water has to be taken out. You can't do this all the time because you have animals constantly. As I said, this is the agrarian world, and you have animals that are constantly, near wells because that's where they, feed the animals. That's where they water the animals. So it's bound to happen.
But this is only for the water of the well, right? Or-
Yes,
Okay.
water of the well.
If you have, like, for example, a tank with water and feces or like dung island falls into it, then it's najis. Or-
If it's ma'un qalil. If it's ma'un qalil, then yes. But if it's like a massive vat,
Yeah.
yeah, then that's my kathir. The hukum would be different.
When you say the body of water 10 by 10,
Yes.
is that meter or I believe that is a shari?
Yeah, it's a Shari thing. It's a Shari thing. I think it's, I have to look at the exact, I think it's a little bit more than 10 meters.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a little bit more than 10 meters. It's
okay.
quite large.
Okay.
Because this question was posed to one of the students of Abu Hanifa. So he was asked that what constitutes excessive water. So he said, "Kamashidi hada," like this masjid. So they measured the masjid from inside, and I believe it was like 8 by 8, and they measured the masjid from outside, and it was 10 by 10. So 10,
Or different units.
yeah. So it was dirham.
8 or 10
It's
So I think it's cubits.
yeah, cubits.
10 cubits.
Cubits, like dira.
That's-
Dirham.
Arm length.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because at that time, I guess there was no meter.
Yes. So dirham.
Oh, like this much?
Yes. So the whole thing.
Arm
The
length.
whole arm.
Whole arm length is 10 cubits.
I know that people, they do this kind of measurement.
No, the whole dirham. The whole thing.
Because almost like a yard.
Well, now we have yardsticks and measuring tape and everything, but in old days, people used to even measure the land by walking, by footsteps. Or, yeah, that's right.
A meter is about 2 cubits.
Oh, 1 meter is
About 2 cubits. A little bit less.